So Necrons have got good, but what is the best dynasty and how do you win your games? It's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, Necrons have just got good. The Warzone Nephilim chapter approved has come out. We've got new secondaries for Necrons which seem very good indeed. We've had some points reductions, and on top of all that we've had a data slate change, changing our command protocols and how they work, and also giving us even more core units. Necrons are in a good place, and I have to say it's been crazy working out all of the potential combos and possibilities that we now have. However, I want to just calm down and really study this book and work out exactly how we are going to win our games. And the best way to do that is look at our primary and secondary objectives and work out which are the best dynasties so that we can achieve those objectives, because points wins 40k in 9th edition. So let's get straight to it and have a look at our secondary objectives. Okay, so the first one is the No Mercy, No Respite category. We're looking at the Treasures of Eons for Necrons. So the enemy chooses 3 objectives. However, they have to choose 3 objectives in no man's land before they can choose them in their own deployment zone. This means if you're playing a strike force mission, it's going to be a minimum of 3 objectives in no man's land, and it's going to be a minimum of 2 objectives in no man's land if you're playing incursion. Now, scoring these objectives is really good. You get 2 points for holding 1 objective, 3 points for holding 2 objectives, and then 5 points for holding 3 objectives. And these are scored at the end of each turn, and they start from turn 1. I'm thinking Eternal Conqueror's Relentlessly Expansionist would be really good for this particular secondary. That 6-inch pre-game move, giving you the ability to get into position to take the objectives, and of course being objective secure is going to really help secure those objectives. So I think that's going to be your best option for this particular secondary. So in the No Mercy, No Respite category, the Treasures of Eons seems really good. We do have the options for Grinds Them Down, which is basically kill more, and No Prisoners, which is inflicting wounds. It doesn't include monsters or characters, but as you inflict wounds, you add up the kill points and you get points that way. I think all in all, the Treasures of Eon is going to be the best one out of this category, but for now we're going to park it and move on to the next category. And that is Purge the Enemy, and the Necron one of course is Code of Combat. Now this is scored at the end of the battle, and noble units, so things like the Silent King and Overlords, and of course that does include the Catacomb Command Barge, score points for killing things. So it's 3 points for killing a unit from shooting and 4 points for killing a unit in melee. Now on top of this, another nice little bonus is you gain a CP if a noble unit kills a character in melee. That's pretty nice, especially with the lack of CPs that we now have in the game. Now the other secondaries in this category is Assassination, where you have to kill characters if your opponent has a lot of characters, and then you have Bring It Down, which is kill monsters or vehicles. Again, if your enemy has a lot of monsters and vehicles, then this could be an option, especially if you don't have the Silent King in your list, because I think ultimately if you have the king in your list, you are going to be playing Code of Combat. But for now, let's park it, move on to the next one. So next it's Shadow Operations, Ancient Machineries. So this is an action, and it's done by 1 core unit or 1 canoptic unit each turn, and you can do it from turn 1. Now you can't do it on an objective in your own deployment zone, but all other objectives you can. It's done at the end of the movement phase, and each objective can only be done once per game. Now the action is completed in your next command phase, unless you have objective secure, and then it's done at the end of the turn, and that's really powerful because you want to have an action that your opponent can't stop you from doing. Now you score 4 victory points for each completed action. So of course objective secure is going to be the key thing here when it comes to this secondary objective. So Eternal Conquerors or potentially Nihilic to give you that objective secure. If you went through Eternal Conquerors, I would suggest Relentlessly Expansionist would be really useful, that 6-inch pre-game move, helping you get onto the objectives. But if you went for Nihilic, then you do have the Protocol of Eternal Guardians. That's especially useful if you go second, because you're being counted as being in light cover all the time, because if you go second, well, you're not moving each battle round, so it's always in effect. That's really nice. I think Eternal Conquerors and Relentlessly Expansionist is really good for this secondary, that pre-game move, just getting you onto the objectives as quick as you can, and then obviously objective secure, allowing you to do the actions as quick as you can. Now, you could potentially take the Sudden Storm Nephilic protocol. That's the one to have on all game, and that will allow you to do actions and shoot. So once you're on the objectives, you can shoot your guns whilst doing the action. I mean, that's just super good for this particular secondary. Now obviously, as always, it depends on your list. I mean, you may not have many shooting units, you may be full assault, in which case that probably wouldn't be the best command protocol. However, I think this is the best protocol to have with this particular secondary. So, Shadow Operations, as I said, Eternal Conquerors, Relentlessly Expansionist or Nihilic. Personally, I think Eternal Conquerors would be the best option. Now, the other options in this category are Raise the Banners High, which can only be done by infantry units, and then Retrieve Nephilim Data, which can only be done by infantry or bikes. And also, that's just a maximum of 12 points. So even if you get all 4 quarters, you can only score 12 points. And we are limited on only infantry there, or maybe bikes. So overall, I think Ancient Machineries, where you can do it with core units and canoptic units, and we have a lot of both. Don't forget, our vehicles are core now, so our vehicles can do the action, and if you're using the protocol I was talking about, they can still shoot. Pretty good. I'm thinking Annihilation Barges. But for now, we're going to park it and move on to Battlefield Supremacy, and the Necron one is Purge the Vermin. This has had some changes, but it's still very good. So at the end of each turn, and from turn 1, you score 1 point for each table quarter with no enemy units in it, and then you score 1 point for no enemy units in your deployment zone. So if you're going first, unless your opponent has infiltrating units, you're going to score 3 points straight away. And if your opponent does have an infiltrating unit, this is scored at the end of the turn. So you still have the ability to shift that unit, shooting and assaulting them. Now it's worth noting here that it does exclude aircrafts. So if your opponent has an aircraft, they can't stop you scoring your purge with that particular unit. And as I said, the key thing here is it's done from turn 1, allowing you to potentially score 3 points straight away for doing nothing. So Purge the Vermin, and it works with any dynasty. You just have to stop your opponent getting into a quarter. Now competing with this is Behind Enemy Lines, where you have to get into your enemy's deployment zone. Are you taking this? Have you ever taken this? I mean, this is a really bad one for Necrons, I feel. And then Engage in All Fronts, where you have to get into table quarters, at least 3 quarters to score. And now the new rules are you have to be within 6 inches away from another table quarter rather than the centre of the board. So this is even harder to score unless you've got a lot of really good fast units. Necrons can have fast units. However, I'm pretty convinced that Purge the Vermin is the best one to go for out of the Battlefield Supremacy. However, we are going to park it for now, because we have one more category to look at, and that's Warpcraft. Now there is no Necron dedicated one in this category. We've got Abhor the Witch, which is to kill enemy psychers. We have Warp Ritual to do psychic actions, which of course we can't do, and Psychic Interrogation, again, psychic actions, which we can't do. So we've only really got Abhor the Witch to kill enemy psychers. Now, if your opponent has a lot of psychers, this could be an option. When I play Richard and his orcs, sometimes he has 5 psychers on the table, or potentially when he's playing his 1,000 Suns. It is an option, but generally, I was taking those because I had no better options. And in a really competitive environment, if your opponent knows you've got this secondary, they're probably going to protect their psykers more than if you didn't have it. So it may be more difficult to score it. So it is very situational, and your opponent can easily deny it. So back to no mercy, no respite. So we have agreed, or at least I've told you, that the Eternal Conquerors and Relentlessly Expansionist is the one to go for when you're taking treasures. Now if you are taking grinds them down, kill more, then potentially you have Mefret or a shooting type army if you're taking a lot of shooting units. However, I think Novok is also a very good option for grinds them down because, well, let's face it, 40k is very much about assault. Now if you're taking no prisoners, again you're probably going to be taking Novok because, well, you just want to kill stuff. And like I said, 40k at the moment is all about the assault. Now next it's Purge the Enemy and Code of Combat, which does work with any dynasty, but you really want the Silent King in the list for this one. Now this works very good in the Necron Dynasty and also in the Novok Dynasty. Now if you want to find out more about the Silent King, I'm going to direct you to a video by Planet 40k, another great Necron channel. If you're not subscribed to him yet, then why not? There's a link to that video in the description below. I'd highly recommend that you subscribe to his channel, and of course if you love Necrons, then subscribe to my channel as well. Now next it's Assassination, which of course is kill characters, and this will work in the Novok Dynasty really well because of course most character killing is done in melee. And we have Bring It Down, kill monsters or vehicles. Now the Mefret Dynasty could be a good option here where you want to obviously shoot quite a lot at those big things. However, the Novok Dynasty is also going to be very good here as well. So some options. However, if you're taking the Silent King, you're almost definitely going to be taking Code of Combat. So next, Shadow Operations, Ancient Machineries. I'm suggesting Eternal Conquerors and Relentless Expansionist for this one. Raise the banner high. Again, if you've got objective secure units to help you maintain those objectives, then Eternal Conquerors and Relentless Expansionist would be a good one to go for. Now Retrieve Nephilim data could also benefit from the Relentless Expansionist to help you move and get onto objectives, and well, there's nothing wrong with being objective secure as well. However, it does work in any dynasty. I mean, you could take the +1 inch movement, plus you've got the Mine Will Be Done. You could be getting your movement from that. You know, we've got lots of options, and that's the great thing about this new update. So lastly, it's Battlefield Supremacy, and as I said, Purge the Vermin works really well with the pre-game move and being objective secured. Behind enemy lines can work with any dynasty. However, the pre-game move is really useful, and if you are objective secure, it's going to help you take objectives when you are behind enemy lines. And then Engage on all fronts. Again, this works with any dynasty, but once again, if you've got the pre-game move objective secure, even though you're not going for objectives, you're going to be out and about in different areas of the board, and potentially having that objective secure is going to be useful for getting objectives as well as Engage on all fronts. However, all three of these will work with any dynasty depending on your list. Okay, so time for some conclusions. So Code of Combat works really well with the Necron Dynasty or the Novok Dynasty. The other three are very well suited to Eternal Conquerors and Relentlessly Expansionist. However, that particular combination works pretty well in Code of Combat as well. Now, if you weren't taking the Silent King, let's just say you don't have the model, or you don't like the model, or you just want to play something different, or maybe you're playing a smaller game, maybe 1,000 points, and you haven't got enough points to put the Silent King in. Well, I'd recommend the other three Necron objectives in that case, and as well as Objective Secure and the pre-game move, the other great dynasty for all three of those is going to be Novok. The Novok protocols are really good, especially the +1 to strength in the first round of combat. Have that all game. That means your flayed ones are strength 5. You've got the stratagem to give you +1 to strength as well. You could have strength 6 flayed ones. That's really useful. So the Novok Dynasty is for me one of the standout ones along with this custom dynasty. So the general conclusion is the Necron secondaries are the best. Eternal Conquerors, Relentless Expansionist, Novok and Serican are also the best dynasties. But we've got lots of other options depending on the list build, and that of course is a massive plus point for the new rules. Now don't forget, we've got primary objectives as well. And of course the best way to score the primary objectives is to be objective secure. You could take Nyalek, or as I've suggested, Eternal Conquerors and Relentless Expansionist. I think it's pretty clear which ones are the best dynasties, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments box below. I'd really love to know your thoughts on this video. And if you want to see more videos on the new rules, here's the playlist that I've made with all of those in, and here is a playlist with my top 3 units. However, there's slight changes to that with the new rules. More to come on that.